Today on 17.5, classifying triangles, we are going to classify triangles not only by their side lengths, but also their angle measures as well. So there's two ways to identify and name a triangle. It's by their side lengths and the angle measures. We're going to go through some vocabulary words on the triangles on how to classify them. One way to classify triangles is by the lengths of their sides. So here's the first way to classify its side, and we call it a scalene triangle. The definition of a scalene triangle is that it has no congruent sides. So all of the sides are a different length. And you can go ahead and pause and draw this picture. Make sure that all three sides are different there. A scalene triangle has no congruent sides. The next type of triangle by the length of their side is called an isosceles triangle. An isosceles triangle has at least two congruent sides, so at least two. All three of them actually could be congruent and it would still be isosceles, but they need to have at least two. So you notice that we have some tick marks, and we know that the tick marks, the same number of tick marks, means those sides are congruent. The third triangle is called an equilateral triangle. In an equilateral triangle, all of the sides are congruent. So all sides are the same. And you notice here by our picture, we have one tick mark on each side, which means that all the sides are the same measure. The second way to classify the triangle is by the measure of their angles. So we can name them by the length of their sides and by their angle measures. So the first one by the angles is called an acute triangle. An acute triangle are when all of the angles are acute. So we know that smaller than 90. The next triangle there is the obtuse triangle. An obtuse triangle has one obtuse angle. So you notice here we have one larger angle, bigger than 90, and then the other two are smaller, acute angles. And our third triangle is called a right triangle. It has one right angle. The other sides there are acute. And you'll notice we have our symbol in the corner here for a right triangle, knowing that, okay, yeah, we have a right angle, so it is a right triangle.
Good morning, students. This is Mr. Hughes. Yes, I'm back. Thanks, Mrs. P, for taking us through all those definitions. We're going to take you through some examples at this time. So example A, you can see that there is a triangle that has two tick marks, and the tick marks happen to be the same with one little mark there on each one. And so if we want to identify these triangles according to their sides and angles, we can do that. So the first one has two sides that are congruent, and we know that if two sides are congruent, it's an isosceles triangle. But we also need to look at the angles, and we can see that all those angles are acute, so it's an acute triangle. So in all, it's an isosceles acute triangle. In example B, you can see that we have a little symbol down in the corner here. That means that's an automatic indication that it's a right triangle. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But we have no tick marks, which means there's no sides that are congruent. So if there's no congruent sides, we know that has to be scalene. As I said earlier, there's a little symbol in the corner, so that means that it's a right triangle with that symbol. So we have, in all, a scalene right triangle. In example C, you can see that we have three tick marks, all indicating that they are congruent sides. All congruent sides means that it has to be an equilateral triangle. That means they're all equal. Looking at that triangle, you can see that we have three acute angles, so therefore that would be an acute triangle. So in all, we have an equilateral acute triangle. And finally, the last one, we have no tick marks on our triangle. With no tick marks, that's an automatic indication that there are no congruent sides. No congruent sides means that it's scalene. And because we do have the symbol again in the corner, that means it's a right triangle. So therefore we have a scalene right triangle. The next examples you don't need to write down. We're just going to kind of run through them, and you can work through these in your head. But we have in letter E, we have two tick marks. That tells me that two sides are congruent. You should automatically be thinking to yourself, oh, okay, that's this type of triangle. And we have, it looks like it's a little bit bigger than 90 degrees right here. We know it's not 90, even though it might look that way, because there's no symbol for it. So let's take a look. We have two congruent sides. We know that that's going to be an isosceles. We have one obtuse angle, so therefore it's going to be an isosceles obtuse triangle. In example F, you can see we have some tick marks here, and there's a double tick mark and a double tick mark here. That tells me that two sides are congruent. We also have the symbol in the corner. That should also indicate that it's a right triangle. So two congruent sides tells me that it is isosceles, like the previous example. The symbol in the corner means that it's right, so we know that this is an isosceles right triangle. Two more examples here. Again, we have a triangle with no tick marks, so therefore we could indicate to ourselves that there's no congruent sides. We also have an obtuse angle in there, so no congruent sides tells me it's scalene. One angle exceeding 90 degrees, or an obtuse angle, would be a triangle that is a scalene obtuse triangle. Finally, our last example here, again, very similar to the previous example. We don't have any symbols in the corner. We do have an obtuse angle, and we don't have any tick marks. So with no tick marks, no congruent sides, that's scalene. One obtuse angle, or an angle exceeding 90 degrees, also tells me that it's obtuse. And so therefore we have a scalene obtuse triangle. All right, and finally we have an example where we're given a number of triangles in one figure. As a matter of fact, we have four. If you look at this, we have triangle AEC, okay, right there. We also have this smaller triangle ABD, and we have this smaller triangle BDC. And then we have this big one here, this ACB. We have four different triangles, and we need to indicate what types there are and how many of each we have, and we want to be able to name them. So let's start off with a first example that we will do here, and we'll put in scalene. Okay, so we're going to look for all the scalene triangles. So as we look at this, we will search and find two scalene triangles, and those triangles are going to be listed as ABD, right here, ABD. Again, no sides are congruent. And BCD, right here. Two scalene triangles. Then we're going to look at our isosceles triangles. Okay, and remember back to your definition of isosceles. And we're going to indicate how many isosceles triangles we have. We have two isosceles triangles. As you can see, we can look at this and go with an ACE and an ABC. ABC. So we have two of those isosceles triangles. Do we have any equilateral triangles? Well, I don't have any tick marks that are indicating three sides equivalent, so we're not going to have any equilateral triangles, so we're not even going to put that in our chart. So we'll move on to the next one. We'll go to the right triangles, and as you can see, there's two symbols for right triangles, so that should automatically tell you there's two. And you can name those, and those would be the ABD and the BCD. Next, we'll go into our obtuse triangle, and looking at the obtuse triangle, looks like this is going to be our best bet right here. We know it's not a right triangle because there's no symbol here, but it is an angle that exceeds 90 degrees. So by the looks of things, we only have one of those, and it's going to be angle ACE. And finally, we have an acute triangle. How many acute triangles do we have? Well, again, we can't count the right triangles as acute triangles. So it looks like we have this big one here with one of them, and it's going to be angle ABC. And again, we can take a look at this symbol here, or this star shape, and look at the triangles and how many we have and all that. So isosceles triangles, there's going to be 5 of them, and you can kind of take a look with some of these triangles there. You have a DJA, so this triangle right up here. Okay, again, we're looking for the congruent sides, 2 congruent sides. We have BCD. We have, again, this one here, this little edge. We have these here, this we have the HJI right here. And we have the, we already did the DFE. We have the JDG, this big one in here. We kind of don't have a line there. So there's 5 of those. Obtuse triangles. Looks like we have 2 obtuse triangles. DGA, DJA. Right here's an obtuse. Right there's your obtuse angle. And an ADG. ADG. This whole big one right here. Okay. And then our acute angles, we're going to have quite a few of those. We have 4 of those. And we have one here. We have one right here. We have this one right in here. And we have this one right here. So that's how we're going to identify the different types of angles by their sides and by their angles. Ladies and gentlemen, your assignment for today is going to be worksheet 17.5. That will be due tomorrow. Have a great day.